Good evening. I'm Percy Ashcraft, your county administrator, and I'd like to call to order the organizational meeting of the Caroline County Board of Supervisors for the year 2011. In attendance this evening are Mr. Wayne Akers, representing the Madison District, Mr. Bobby Popowitz, representing the Port Royal District, Mr. Maxie Roselle, representing the Reedy Church District, Mr. Jeff Seeley, representing the Bowling Green District, and Mr. Floyd Thomas, representing the Mattaponi District. The first order of business is the election of the position of chairman for the year 2011. Gentlemen, nominations are now open for this position. Mr. Akers.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Floyd Thomas as chairman.
Second.
Placed in the nomination and properly seconded is the name of Floyd Thomas of the Mattaponi District for the position of chairman. Is there a motion to close the nominations and elect Mr. Thomas by acclamation?
So moved.
Been moved?
Second.
Been properly seconded that the nominations have been closed. Mr. Thomas will be elected by acclamation, and in order to do that and to affirm that vote, I will ask individually each board member to cast their ballot. Mr. Popowitz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Akers?
Yes.
Mr. Seeley?
Yes.
Mr. Roselle?
Yes.
And Mr. Thomas. By a vote of 5-0, Mr. Thomas will serve as the chairman for year 2011. Ms. Chairman, congratulations, and I turn the gavel over to you. And on behalf of staff, we look forward to working with you throughout this year for a very successful 12 months.
Thank you, Mr. Ashcraft, and fellow board members. I do appreciate the honor you've bestowed me, and I promise to do the best I can. That would now take us to the election of the vice chairman. So nominations for vice chairman would be in order at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I would nominate Mr. Wayne Akers.
Second.
Roselle nominates Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz. Is there another nomination? Motion nominations be closed.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Popowitz has motioned and Mr. Seeley has seconded that nominations be closed with the name of Wayne Akers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. So that motion carries. And at this point, we'll rearrange our seating, if that's all right. Mr. Roselle and Mr. Akers. I'm not sure I want to be known. Thank you. Okay. Now, board members have in their packets, as our next order of business would be adoption of rules, bylaws. We've judged ourselves by Robert's Rules of Order. Any questions on the rules? No changes were proposed. Board members like to approve those? A motion would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Popowitz motions, Mr. Akers seconds that the rules of order be adopted as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries. The next order of business is our 2011 regular meeting schedule. The board has had 2 meetings on odd numbers months or odd numbered months, and 1 meeting on the even numbered months. Does the board wish to continue that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we leave the schedule as is for another year. I think it's worked out pretty well for staff. We were able to propose that we make a motion that we leave it as is.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz to use the schedule of regular board meetings as presented. The board will meet twice during the odd months and once during the even months. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion too carries.
Mr. Chairman, if I could point out two two matters within the calendar that I would ask the board to look at and give consideration to. One is the February meeting would normally fall on February the 8th. I have a conflict, a family conflict with that date, and I would ask the board if they would consider moving that meeting to February the 10th. Excuse me. And while you're considering that, the election, the general election this year is the second Tuesday, which would be November the 8th, which normally would be our regular board meeting. It's been proposed in your calendar that that meeting be moved to November the 15th. Is it 10th?
We have it the 10th.
Okay, I'm sorry, November the 10th, the Thursday the 10th. Both changes have been asked to be moved to the Thursday following the meeting.
So we're moving February 8th to the 10th and November 8th to the 10th.
That's the proposal, yes, sir, and I didn't know if any other board members had
And I believe,
personal conflicts in their schedules that they may want to determine at this time.
okay. Any other, I know we always have a conflict or two with vacation schedules ahead of time. Anybody notice a conflict right now? Okay.
Right now,
The only one we may want to consider later is November 22nd. Thanksgiving's probably 2 days later. As we get closer, we may want to look at that date.
Okay. November 22nd date, and I will be probably, and I say probably, on vacation the 27th of April. So I'll wait until we get a little closer to see if we can move that. So we have two changes we're going to propose right now. The two changes would be February 8th, moving to the 10th, and November 8th, moving to November 10th. Is there a motion to that effect?
so moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Akers, seconded by Mr. Popowitz to amend our schedule to reflect the February 8th meeting will be February 10th, and the November 8th meeting to be also November 10th. Discussion on readiness. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion carries also, and now we get to board member appointments. And I had those right in front of me a second ago. Okay, the first one would be the Rappahannock Area on Aging. Mr. Rozelle served in the past. Mr. Rozelle, would you like to continue, or is there another board member who would like to serve on it? Mr. Rozelle, you'd like to continue?
Anybody likes it, they're certainly,
Okay.
we'd encourage them to apply. If not,
If not, I think Mr. Rozelle is going to be our appointee there. Is that good with you, Ms. Rozelle?
yes, sir.
Okay, Social Services Board, and I'm going to wait until the end, and we'll adopt those as we've discussed them. Social Services Board, Mr. Seeley served before. Would you like to continue in that capacity, Mr. Seeley?
I would enjoy serving another year.
Okay, George Washington Regional Commission, Mr. Rozelle and Mr. Popowitz served last year. Would you gentlemen be interested in continuing?
I probably would like to see if someone else is interested in that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Popowitz, are you,
That's fine.
you'd like to continue? Okay. Is there another board member who would like to serve on the George Washington Regional Commission? Mr. Akers? Okay, so we'll add Mr. Akers. That'll be one change. Fredericksburg Chamber of Commerce, Military Affairs Council, Mr. Seeley, as the only veteran on the board. Would you like to continue again?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Rappahannock River Basin Commission, Mr. Thomas served the last year and the year before, and would like to know if anyone else would be interested. Mr. Popowitz, there is a fairly big river in your district. Would you be interested?
Meeting schedule is not conducive.
Okay. I have the Mattapanai. All right, I'll continue to serve there, and we'll work out the meeting schedule. Fredericksburg Regional Alliance was Mr. Popowitz. Interested in continuing?
I'll continue.
Yes? Okay, Mr. Popowitz is there. Recreational Advisory Committee, Mr. Akers served there last year. We can continue on that path if you'd like, Mr. Akers?
That's fine.
Okay, Mr. Akers has continued on that path. And we have the board liaisons. And I'm gonna kind of break those up a little bit, since that's the chair's prerogative in this case?
Mr. Chairman, Disabilities Board,
Did I miss one?
that's the one that I serve.
Oh, let us not forget that one. I'm sorry. Okay, I skipped one. The regional or the Rappahannock Regional Disability Services Board, Mr. Ashcraft served on that one before, and I'm sure the board is interested in having Mr. Ashcraft serve again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank
Outstanding. So the only change we have is Mr. Akers on the George Washington Council. Okay, for the liaisons, I'd like to do a little bit differently if we could. I'm going to ask, I know there's an education committee, and I know there are joint meetings, chairman to chairman, but I'm going to ask Mr. Akers if he would serve on the education part. Because I think you may have a little bit more of an opportunity to have those meetings, and you've got a daytime schedule, it may work out. So we're going to have Mr. Akers serve on education. For technology, I'm going to ask Mr. Seeley if he will serve on the technology committee.
Yes, sir.
And then we're going to have a public safety, and I'm going to ask Mr. Popowitz if he would serve on the public safety one. And that's sheriff, fire and rescue. Okay. Thank you, sir. And I'm going to ask Mr. Rozelle if he would serve on the utilities and public works. And I'll serve on the finance committee this year. So we've all gotten a new liaison just to make sure there's some new places, and it may not be the most appropriate as it was before, but I think in this case it's all new, so we'll all have a lot to learn and share with each other. We're going to leave planning alone. Just the ones that I went through, so. Okay? So Mr. Akers on education, Mr. Seeley on technology, Mr. Rozelle on public works and utilities, Mr. Rozelle, public works and utilities, Mr. Popowitz, public safety, and I'll do finance. And I believe that is the end of the appointments. Okay. So if there's a motion to the effect to have the appointments as they were last year, with the exception of Mr. Akers serving on the George Washington Regional Commission, and with the exception of the liaisons that I mentioned, I would appreciate that, and we could move on.
I'll make a motion to accept the appointments as presented by the chair.
Second?
All right, discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion will carry. And at this point in time, we will actually, do I need a motion to close the organizational meeting? Is there a motion to close the organizational meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rozelle, seconded by Mr. Popowitz and Mr. Seeley. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The organizational meeting is closed. At this time, we will call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors, the January 11th meeting, which was rescheduled to January 18th. And at this time, if I could use Reverend Moen, as I've asked, because the Lord uses us in his own way. So, Reverend, he's made you a reverend, and now we're going to use that theological experience, and I'm going to ask you if you would provide us an invocation for this evening.
I'd be pleased to. Let's pray.
Thank you, sir.
In these quiet moments, O God, we draw close to your presence, thanking you for your presence here in this place and in our lives. We're grateful, O God, and for this nation in which we live, this commonwealth, the county, and our own communities. We're grateful for the leadership that you provided over the years and the way that we've found protection in your strength, wisdom through your guidance, and a sense of community, O God, that's wrought from you. God, our hearts go out to other parts of the world and even our nation and places like Tucson this day, where people are still struggling with grief and hurt. May your protective power continue to envelop us. May we know your embrace. Lead this meeting, O God. We're grateful for these leaders who sit before us. We thank you for our community, our friends, and our neighbors. May truly this place, O God, in which we live, Caroline County, be a wonderful place as we continue to seek guidance and wisdom, far beyond ourselves, before we pray. In your name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. If you'll now join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And again, Reverend Moen, thank you very much for that very appropriate invocation. At this time, we'll have amendments to the agenda. I don't believe there were any amendments proposed.
No, sir.
No amendments. We'll move on with opening board comments. Mr. Popowitz?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rozelle?
Have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley?
I would just like to thank those that made the decision to postpone the meeting from last week to this week. I think it was a great decision, and with what I saw on my way home, I'm glad we didn't have to come and endanger anybody else. So thank you.
Mr. Akers?
No, sir.
Mr. Rozelle, I'm going to pass this back to you and allow you to do
Okay.
another opening comment. That there. Mr. Rozelle does have an opening comment after all.
Well, certainly, I'd like to take back, it was delivered from Supervisor Seeley, the Frog Level Volunteer Rescue Squad received second place in the Bowling Green Parade. So I'm going to proudly take this back to the folks back in home in Frog Level. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rozelle. And I have no opening board comments, so at this time we'll move right to presentations. I see Ms. Kearns here, so we'll do the treasurer's report.
Good evening. How are you all this evening?
Good, thank you.
I echo Mr. Seeley's comment about last week. I, too, am glad that we didn't have to come down and face the weather, even though I didn't have that far to go, but for those that were traveling. Looking at the revenue report, the taxes for the first 6 months of the year are up. They're about 53% of the budget have been collected. If I looked at the taxes that we have collected, the percentage for 2009 and 2010, as far as what has been assessed and collected, and for the year for 2009, as of December 31st, we've collected almost 93% of the total assessment, which is a good percentage for personal property. For the 2010, we're sitting right now at 76% of what we've assessed, but we normally see the remaining percentage come in during January, February, and March with folks, their income tax returns, they're paying in order to get the decals, which we'll have this one more year. We are getting set up for the permanent decal. I showed a proof to Mr. Ashcraft, and we're in the process now of having those produced and getting the applications out to the folks. We hope to have them out by the middle of February so we can start that process. For the real estate taxes, we're at 97% for 2009 for the total assessment. For the 2010, we're just slightly below 94%, which is still a good percentage of the total assessment for the folks that have paid, because again, we have some of those that come in this the next few months. As far as looking at the overall, the local taxes are up from last year, but most of that is explained because of the 911. We're now recording all the consumer utility taxes that were in the 911 fund are now in the general fund, since 911 has been incorporated into the general fund. And looks like permits are up slightly from last year, and the ambulance fees are slightly over budget if you take into account the direct deposit, because of the timing of the meeting, getting the report out to you all. We had not gotten the information from Diversified as far as how much had come in for Medicare payments. Debt retirement looks like it's the revenue from consumer utility taxes and the meals taxes are slightly over 50%. And the utilities, where the dollar amount that we've collected for utilities and the billings for the utility consumption is up dollar-wise slightly over last year, but still it's a little less than 50% of what we're projecting for this year. And that's kind of a snapshot of the revenues. Do you all have any questions?
Ms. Pappas, questions? Ms. Roselle? Mr. Seeley?
No, sir.
Mr. Akers? Okay, you had mentioned, just one quick one, you had mentioned we were 94% of our 2010 real estate?
Of the total that we have assessed and collected for the calendar year. It's not what we've collected as far as the revenue, because what you're seeing here in the budget, we've got half of 2010, and then the 2011 is shown separately as the other half of the taxes. So I'm looking at the calendar year and trying to see how we've done for the year.
Okay, so you look at the calendar year, not necessarily the fiscal year, because it does lap over. I was going to say there was a lot of people who paid ahead of time, if that was the case. All right, that's the only real question I had. We are at the 50% mark in the fiscal year budget, or we're halfway through, so the things that are 50% should be good. Anything that you noticed that we should pay particular attention to?
There's still some things that are out there that, usually come in, as far as in the second 6 months with the, new personal property, the new real estate. You've got business license taxes that are all mostly collected in this following 6 months, and there's some state school revenue that comes in after, in the second 6 months as opposed to the first 6 months.
And then we get that utility revenue too at the June or whatever, May or June, something like that. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Curran.
Thank you.
Next will be our VDOT report, and we have several representatives from VDOT. Good to see you as always.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Marcy Parker. I'm the Assistant District Administrator for Maintenance. This is the first time you will have seen me, and hopefully not the last, but we do have a government liaison now that will be your contact person for Caroline County, and that is Rodney White.
Mr. White, good to see you.
Rodney is our Transportation Land Use Director, so he will be the government liaison for Caroline, Stafford, and Spotsylvania counties. Also with me tonight is Jake Porter, and Jake is the new residency administrator for the Fredericksburg residency. So very similar to the role Mr. Stunkel had with you, that will now be Jake's role. So any maintenance concerns that you all have, you can either contact Rodney or you can contact Jake directly. We will make sure that Mr. Ashcroft has all the information from both people. I believe previously you've been corresponding with Ms. Jamie Brown Porter, and she was supposed to come last week, but she had a conflict this week, so she asked me to come instead. And I'm also new in my position now that I'm up at the district. Previously, I was a residency administrator for 10 years in Saluda Residency, which is also in the Fredericksburg district. So I know a little bit of Caroline County, but not a lot. So for the attendance, I believe that I don't know if we were attending quarterly here in Caroline County or just on an as-requested basis, but we can do either, whatever the pleasure of the board. We just need to coordinate that with Mr. White, and he'll be happy to come quarterly at your request. It's up to you, and we can provide a written update for any month that we do not attend.
Now, is quarterly the most we can get him here? When Mr. Stunkel was here, it was actually once a month. And I understand there's changes in VDOT, and then it went to kind of as requested. So let's try to firm up something. Is quarterly the best we can have, or can we have him every odd month where we have 2 meetings a month, maybe come the first?
And that would be up to his schedule. Government liaison is not his only job with VDOT. He also oversees all our land use issues, so this is just part of his job. So,
but this is going to be the best part, though.
I can put you on the spot now, Rodney.
So we can work that out. I can get with Mr. Ashcraft.
Okay. Now, we are filming. So if you'd like to give
we
us
have
your
you on
phone
tape.
number, we'll be happy to broadcast that around, or you can just pass it to Mr. Ashcraft. We'll make sure we get it later. Thank you, sir.
Okay, an update, Ms. Brown Porter had submitted to me some issues that you had brought up over the past month or so, and I just wanted to give you an update on some of those. The construction project that's out here on Route 207 at 652, that was putting in the new lanes and the new roadway, that project is complete with the exception of the permanent striping. The contractor was unable to get the permanent striping down due to the weather issues. He will be coming in and putting in some temporary striping, and then once the weather lets up and it gets warmer, he'll come back and put in the permanent striping. He still has time on his contract. It's not like he's gone past his completion date, but we're unable to put in the permanent striping with the weather conditions that we've been having. So we will be doing that. There was also a question about the possibility of a left turn lane for automobiles maybe into the McDonald's from 207 westbound. And what we will do is we will forward that request to our traffic engineering section and have them look at that. We cannot do it under the project, but they'll look at that for safety, and once everything's working properly and analyze, and we'll get back to you on that issue. The question came up about a through truck restriction on Route 610, and from what I can understand, Mr. Porter just received the information from the county, which included your public hearing announcement, your public hearing minutes, as well as your resolution, and now we're forwarding that down to our central office, traffic engineering. They do all our through truck studies. That is a pretty lengthy process. Once they finish their study and have their recommendation, if the recommendation is to post it with a through truck restriction, then we here in the district will have to post a comment period for 30 days. We'll post signs on the road as well as something in the newspaper. We'll take comment for 30-day period. We then compile all those comments. We also take comments from the Trucking Association, who we will contact, and then we make our recommendation to traffic engineering. They firm all that up, and the commissioner will approve secondary through truck restrictions. Traffic engineering in central office does say that from the time we initially get the request to the time that the signs are posted can take as much as 9 months. We do try to make it faster than that, but I just want you to be aware, don't think that next month the signs will be posted, because it is a lengthy process. There's a lot that needs to be taken into account because you are restricting truck traffic on roads. So it does affect the commerce. And the only other thing that I had was a Route 606 CSX crossing. I think the request was to see if we could have that crossing upgraded to a concrete crossing. And we have contacted the CSX and requested an estimate. They have not submitted that to us as of this time. So we will continue to contact them and see what they can do. But I understand that they did fix the immediate problem that you had.
No, ma'am.
Oh,
No, ma'am.
we were told that they did.
It is a mess.
Okay, then we will take another look at that and see what we can do to have the railroad fix that. We unfortunately do not control the railroad. They are on their own. They are their own entity, but we can do what we can. So I think that's all the issues that were brought to our attention that you needed to be updated on. I'll be happy to answer any questions or at least take down information and get you answers for anything you
We may have a few more if you don't mind. Thank you, Ms. Parker.
Sure.
Ms. Popowich, you've got, in addition to one that wasn't repaired, do you have any more?
No, just at 606, it's pretty dangerous. It's starting to get to where the tracks are actually exposed and cars are having to weave around it.
Okay. We'll pass that on to CSX.
Mr. Rozelle?
Mr. Chairman, who may, just on Route 30, between the fairground and Route 301, it has been in the past some discussions about completing the shoulders between there and 652 Signboard Road. And just want to make sure that still stays on your radar, that, because of the problems with the trucks scuffing up the dirt on the side, it creates about a 6-inch drop off there. And it was still in the plans to try to get the shoulders between 652 and 301 completed. So just ask you if you all would check and see where that project is on your plans and let us know, please.
Yes, we could do that. And like I said, I've only been in my position since August, and Jake has only been here about a month, so I don't want to put him on the spot. I don't think he has the entire schedule committed to memory for all three of his counties, but we will check on that and we will let you know.
That is a very narrow road, and those shoulders would make up the difference, I believe.
Okay.
Mr. Sealy?
I don't have any questions tonight.
Mr. Akers?
My question would be, Mr. Rozelle, on Drawbridge Road, some years, maybe probably at least a year ago, we asked that to be a no-through truck traffic.
Yeah, it was a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't see any signs up. The signs haven't been put up yet, or have they?
They haven't been completed yet.
Yeah, because I see trucks on that road all the time when I go on that road. And it's been at least a couple of years ago that
Right.
we voted on
The
that.
process
That-
started and
Stop.
stopped.
Yeah.
Okay, and I did look at the log to see what other through truck restrictions you had, and I did think that Dry Bridge was on there. So we will check those signs, and if they've not been posted, we'll get them up as soon as we can.
They haven't been posted. I just want to say thank you to the Ladysmith Group. They put, we had some potholes there forming at the intersection of 639 and Route 1, and I didn't have to call. I mean, somebody, they saw it themselves and they fixed them, and I really do appreciate the Ladysmith Group taking care of that
Well, good,
issue.
thank you. We'll pass that along.
That's it, okay. Thank you. Mr. Rozelle, it was Sunshine Road, wasn't it, that we did a while back?
That's correct.
That has signs.
That one was completed.
Yeah. So, Ms. Parker, we've been through the truck restriction process before. We
Yes.
understand it does take a while, but we're looking at Dry Bridge, and then we've got another one. And then for me, the Route 652, well, let me start with one thing. I don't know who was here before. I don't think any of your folks were here before. But I want to say, first of all, thank you. I know you guys work from the state. I know you've got a very difficult job. I know our roads are in terrible shape. I know we don't have enough money to fix them. But I do want to say thank you ahead of time, because at some point during my life, I'm going to be very angry at VDOT. So I want to say thank you ahead of time. And the last time I was angry, I just want to remind you, there was road work done at the 104 exit, the Carmel Church exit, and that was actually closed. But the sign saying the exit was closed was actually placed after the King's Dominion exit. So as people drove up, they'd already passed their alternative, and then they had to go another 6 miles north and then turn around, or turn around in the median where they weren't supposed to, and it's really dangerous. So my point of giving you that story is, when there are construction issues like that, if you could please let the county administrator know, we do have a kind of electronic alert system that will tell people via their cell phone, personal email, or whatever. So if there's a change like that in the future, just let us know that, whatever road, whatever exit will be closed, and we can blast it out to as many folks as possible, so it, saves stress on both of our sides.
Okay, great, that's good to know.
So, and I'm sure you can work through that with Mr. Ashcraft or the Sheriff's Department, at least to make sure
Okay.
we know. And then I want to say, I really do appreciate the 652 work. It's been a long time coming. We worked long and hard for it. Whether it's perfect, nothing's perfect, but I think it's really the best we could do right now. And I've had nothing but rave reviews from people who live there. The
Great.
folks that live in Belmont, the folks that make that left turn where it's now too narrow for trucks theoretically to get through. I'm sure one's going to try, but it's been a great job. It's a great project. We really do appreciate the work, and I think it's made a safer county.
Okay, great.
So I thank you on that note, and that's really all I have. We'll work with Mr. White on his attendance schedule. We'll try to have some enticing things here to get him here as much as possible. But we do appreciate your time again, and I just want you to make sure that you understand we are very appreciative of what VDOT does.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You do the same. All right, our next agenda item, Mr. White. I think Mr. Fincher wanted you. Our next agenda item is an overview of general obligation bond financing and referendums for capital projects. And the county attorney is going to make that presentation. Mr. Emerson is making his way to the podium. So as he does, and he is also going to be with the registrar because the actual discussion behind this is should the county decide on a referendum for general obligation bonds for one of the many projects we have, that would require coordination with the registrar. So that's why the registrar is here.
That's the date we need to go by, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think before you start, Mr. Emerson, I recall reading this before, our absolute latest time that we could do this was August. That's the drop dead date of us deciding, because we've got to go to circuit court and all those things. So
That'll be different this year, sir, I'm afraid, because of the primary elections. So let me go through the overview, if I could. You all have asked for an overview of the procedure and the process to do a bond referendum, and that would be for a general obligation bond, which, as you know, is a bond that is backed by the full faith and credit of the county, so that payment on the bond would be enforced. If it wasn't made in some other way by the county, it would be enforced by law through a tax on the property in the county, levied on the property in the county. Other types of bonds that are typically issued are moral obligation bonds, such as a lease financing or a revenue bond that is backed by a revenue stream from a project. For a general obligation bond, and well, the process is generally the same for any general obligation bond unless the GO bond is intended to pay for improvements to schools. If there's a school project as part of the general obligation bond, then there's an added step. The added step is at the beginning, where the school board has to ask the Board of Supervisors through a resolution to request a referendum be put be made at a special election. So the added step is for the school board to also pass a resolution that basically requests the referendum. Once that happens, the board then adopts a resolution that would contain the actual question that is to be put on the ballot for the voters to vote on. It would have to contain the maximum amount of the bonds to be issued and the exact language of the question. So it would contain what the project is, a brief description of the project, and the maximum amount of the bonds. That resolution then gets put into the form of a petition and is filed with the circuit court. The circuit court has to review the petition and enter an order that then places the referendum on the ballot for either a special election or the general election. The special election, if a special election is ordered, there's some time frames that come into play, and that's what makes this year, being an election year, a little bit different from other years and a little bit more tricky, actually. The election has to be held on a Tuesday. It can either be on the day of the general election, which would be November 8th, or it can be on another Tuesday that would be at some other time in the year. However, that special election has to be 81 days after the date of the entry of the court order, and it has to be at least 55 days prior to a general election or a primary election. So the date of the primary becomes important. It also has to be submitted, once it's ordered, it has to be submitted to the Justice Department for pre-clearance, and the Justice Department has 60 days to review it and object. If they don't object, you just go forward. And no special election can be held on the date of a primary election. Let's see. Once all that happens, the referendum question is put on the ballot. You don't have to have a public hearing that you would have to have for some other types of financings. You do have to publish notice of the special election at least once, at least 10 days before the election. Danette has done some research in the General Assembly on bills of when primaries might be scheduled this year, and I think you're thinking it's still September the 13th?
No, August
Or
23rd.
it's in August, okay, well that changes now.